or to the district office.
Stand right here. You got it.
Right there, you're perfect.
Go. Come stand in front of me then and do it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Good job.
Ask if you
We
can.
were wondering if we could say the kids.
Of course, absolutely. We didn't want to put too much of the spotlight on, but.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
do it. I wanna hear you.
I know it. I can do it with you.
Go ahead.
I have dreams for my future. Every day. No exceptions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to the approval of the agenda. Any changes, comments, questions?
Just a note that it is a revised agenda
Yes.
that you all received that we sent out. And just as a point to let everybody know, we had some numbers wrong in the personnel report as far as we're splitting some contracts. And we had to go from a 0.33 add a fourth person and make it a 0.5. So that was the reasoning behind getting that out. And then I had not asked Heidi to put in our HIB presentation. I was just gonna add that, but when we found out we needed to put a revised one out anyway, we just added everything. Just as an FYI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Any other comments or questions?
I assume all those 0.5 football coaches are some for JV. Fingers crossed. Got it.
Yes.
Well, then we'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I will move to approve the agenda.
I will second to approve the agenda.
All right, all in favor?
I
Aye.
All right, on to delegations, Mr. Peterson.
No delegations. I was expecting more fourth graders, but we got one solid one, so none tonight.
All right, so on to the proposed consent agenda. Any comments or questions there? Looks like we're filling up our coaching staff.
Yes.
No, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
will motion to approve the consent agenda.
One second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, and with that, I want to welcome and thank Mr. Bruce Davison, the new principal at the middle school. You want to take the podium and say anything, or no pressure? I don't know if you have a speech written or not. but-
Come on, fourth grader did it.
No speech, but members of the board, Superintendent Peterson. and, Victoria, thank you so much for choosing me to fill this important position. I really look forward to this leadership challenge and helping this district grow and fine tune teachers and students into their best selves. So thanks a lot for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Glad to have you. All right, on to public comment. Do we have any public comments? Any electronic?
No, sir.
Then I will prepare myself with the spiel and the public comment. And we can move on to unfinished business policy 3122, excused and unexcused absences. Revision, Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, thank you. The board should see in front of them a fairly significant revision to policy 3122, excused and unexcused absences. We started to take a look at this and then tabled it, but now it's back, and all of the revisions that you see, and like I said, they're fairly significant. Basically what the challenge was for Mallory Call, who is the ESD re-engagement and attendance specialist, and then Emily Robb, who is below her and works directly with Kai-B in the same role. They took a look at several districts around us, focusing in on Goldendale, meaning that theirs was most up to date, as well as very similar in size to ours, but they picked out pieces of what they felt were the best policies in the area. And the number of revisions were primarily due to the number of changes that have occurred since COVID. We've kind of piecemealed over the past couple of years a few of those changes in as required, usually through other either grants or publications that we needed to put out. So we'd add here and there. This is a complete update. Significant section on asynchronous learning. Let's hope that we don't have to do that again. However, we still have a number of kids who are online right now at all three levels. So some things that apply to them. Also, the purpose being we want to reinforce changes to the policy, but also become more consistent. So you'll see the procedures that match this policy. The biggest difference being that when we get into the procedures, as you know, don't require board approval for changes, but we're going to work through and make sure that all of our schools have the same process and procedures for not only implementation and interpretation of the policy, but that we're consistent with our procedures as well. So pending board approval on the policy itself, which will bring everything up to date, then I'll be working with building principals, Mr. Davison being one of them, prior to the start of the school year to make sure that our principals, our attendance secretaries, and all other folks who have anything to do with attendance K-12 are all on the same page, have the same interpretations, have the same processes and procedures. But I'm very confident, having met with Mallory and Emily last week to go over the changes. And then thank you to Emily for highlighting everything for you so that you could take a further look. I'm very confident that this brings us up into 2024 with the latest and greatest. And then we'll move forward making sure that our schools are applying the process and procedures judiciously and evenly across the board.
Right. So are you needing any action on that?
We would like an approval. Now, of course, even though the board policy will hopefully be approved tonight, we will not put the policy procedures and practices into place until the 24-25 school year. We're not going to shift gears with 8 weeks left.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But of course, that will give us time to publish this onto the web and then get an update of our attendance policy and procedures into each of the school's handbooks, get them out to parents, put them in the new student registration packets, things like that.
All right, any comments or questions on policy 3122? I will entertain a motion on.
I'll motion to approve policy 3122, excused and unexcused absences.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, on to the minutes from March 11th. we tabled this because I was out and wanted to make sure we had a proper quorum to approve that. So any comments or questions from the minutes of 3:11? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on those as well.
I motion to approve the minutes from 3/11/24.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I will abstain.
I wasn't here for that.
For 3:11 you were.
Oh, was it for that one?
Yes.
Oh, was that? Okay.
We're gonna get to 3:25. It's a problem if everyone abstains, so.
Yeah.
Right. Aye.
All right, on to new business. Resolution 1, 2024, form of authorizing resolution. Mr. Rob?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Skipper. This resolution is the first of two tonight around bus financing, which we had discussed at a prior meeting. So this resolution is requesting authorization from the board to enter into the financing agreement. The total amount we have been approved for is $380,404.64, which is the total cost of our two buses. One other piece that I'd like to point out is a section stating a minimum of two authorized agency representatives shall be required to execute any one document in order for it to be executed. So we have three signers, which I have listed, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Skipper, and myself. So it's just saying that two of the three of us must sign all the documents for it to be approved. We are financing for a 7-year time frame for each bus. And the interest rate will be locked in once the documents get back to the treasury. Just so you know, the treasury website, looked at it today, looks like their sales in February came in at 2.77%. So that's actually pretty good right now.
Surprisingly good. I would say.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe we looked at that.
Because I think we looked at Cashmere Bank as well, and they were in the 5 or 6 range. So this was a much better option for us. So I'm just looking for approval on this. Any questions?
And Mr. Skipper, we will need a roll call vote on these resolutions.
All right. Any comments or questions? Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I motion to approve resolution 1-2024 form of authorizing resolution.
I'll second.
And you want to do the roll call, Heidi?
Yes. Yay.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, on to resolution 2, 2024, WIAA, excuse me. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Skipper. This is our annual resolution whereby we delegate authority to the WIA for all of our athletics activities, as well as coverage of officials in L&I and things of that nature. This is the standard yearly resolution for our middle school and high school, and the language has not changed, but of course we get to do it every year and discuss it. So not really much else unless you have any questions.
Yeah, looks pretty straightforward. Referencing a lot of laws from the 1970s, so I imagine not much has changed. Okay, well, if no comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion on that as well.
I will motion to approve resolution 2-2024.
I will second approval of resolution 2-2024 WIAA approval.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, resolution 3, 2024, form of reimbursement resolution. Mr. Rob, up again.
Perfect. So this is the second resolution tied to the bus financing. This resolution is needed based off the timing of when we received the first bus. We recently received it. And with our financing, the funds become available in June. So as is any vendor, they want to get paid. So we're gonna go ahead and pay them. And then the state is gonna reimburse us for it. And then we'll end up starting our payments in December for the buses. So without this resolution, if we pay for the bus, we won't have any reimbursement from the state, so.
That seems like a good one to do then.
Yeah, so,
No-brainer.
which we can do, but it would just give our transportation fund more flexibility in looking at future options.
Sure. I imagine we have the cash to cover that in the meantime.
Yep,
I will entertain a motion for this one unless there are any comments or questions.
I'll move to approve resolution 3-20 or 24.
I'll second.
All right, then Heidi will do the roll call.
Yes, or yay, aye.
All of the above.
Aye.
Aye.
Those days.
Okay, now we'll move on to the minutes from March 25th. Any comments or questions on those? Okay, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes from 3:25.
Motion to approve minutes from 3:25:24.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. And moving on to the HIB presentation. Mr. Peterson.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Skipper. I've got this also in front of me, so I'm not going to read from the slides. And David will be able to press the button and move along. The preface for this presentation is from a couple of conversations that we have had, that I've had with individual board members, as a way to introduce the topic and move into a later discussion, which is next on our agenda. But I felt it was important to get in front of the board some of the state defined state definitions for harassment, intimidation, and bullying, as well as with some of the factors that we have to take into account when considering harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And it's important because this has been obviously a topic that has come up as long as I've been here in other school districts that I've been in. And a lot of it was prefaced by state and State Board of Education action. However, sometimes, as I think there's been at least 2 movies with the name, sometimes things get lost in translation. So, David, if you go ahead and move to the next slide. When we look at harassment, intimidation, and bullying, harassment is defined as any malicious act which causes harm to any person's physical or mental well-being. Intimidation is defined at OSPI as implied or overt threats of physical violence. And then bullying is defined as negative actions which are intentional, repeated, negative, show a lack of empathy and a power imbalance. And the key thing to these 3 definitions as they come to us from the state is, even though there's only one that has it specific in the definition, all of these imply a power imbalance between the parties, and from a school standpoint must interfere with learning on the part of the student or instruction on the part of the teacher. Next slide, please. And then the state goes a step farther, especially around harassment, and becomes much more specific in that we have discriminatory harassment, but it does not have to include intent to harm, be directed at a specific target, or involve repeated incidents. Then they have malicious harassment, threat to harm, which, yes, when you looked at that previous one, also counts as intimidation, the implied or overt threat of physical violence. And then you have sexual harassment and all the sections that go along with that. And again, all of these being under the idea must have a power imbalance and must interfere with learning and or instruction on the part of the students. Next, please. You know, historically, because bullying is obviously not something that we have just come up with in the last 10 or 15 years, but historically, when we were talking about bullying, we talked about it as, yes, it's a school concern, but it took different forms. We talked about getting shaken down for lunch money in the old days. Inappropriate physical contact or verbal abuse, and at least where I grew up in Connell, a lot of these incidents often escalated to fights or assaults. Next, please. But today, the major place that our administrators are finding that they have to deal with the beginnings of bullying and, quite frankly, harassment and intimidation is on social media or otherwise outside of school. And these incidents make their way into the school setting. And oftentimes we have to try and intervene and address occurrences that may or may not be impacting that student learning or teacher instruction. And we're forced, though, to deal with it as a matter within the scope of the school day. Some of these cases, though, do not interfere with learning or instruction, which is where things get very difficult on the part of the administration, because we have a set amount of guidelines that we're supposed to deal with bullying. But many of our historical accounts of bullying are implied to be what the current definition of bullying is, if you understand where I'm going with that. For many of our parents and many of our community members, their understanding of bullying is the same as when we were in school. And it has changed significantly, where now it must involve the power imbalance and interference of learning or instruction. Sometimes those things don't happen. So the muddy part, as you're going to see, is where then does our authority to fix said problem, where does it come to a head at? And that's really what our principals have to deal with. So next slide, please. When you look at any HIB process that currently exists in our schools, there is a set process. The first meeting involves both affected parties, and it's usually non-disciplinary. And the reasoning for this is quite simply that not every act of bullying and harassment is understood by the person doing the bullying and harassing, meaning their actions may not be intended as a true form of bullying and harassment. However, perception is always on the part of the victim. And so our duty is to ensure that the person who the complaint is against understands what the complaint is, what the perception is, and we give them a chance to change their behavior. And it is not disciplinary in nature. However, if harassment, intimidation, or bullying continues between the same parties, it's usually met with exclusionary discipline, which is one of the few things that we move straight to exclusionary discipline for, either an in-school or an out-of-school suspension. On both of those incidents, and I apologize, parents are contacted that we had the first conversation, and then they're contacted a second time if discipline is necessary for a second occurrence.
So when you say contacted, are they present when in the first meeting? Are those parents present when Mr. Davison meets with said child?
They're usually offered the opportunity to be if they choose to. Quite often we have parents, once we explain the situation, they'll go ahead and meet with my student. I can't be there, I'm at work, I can't take, whatever the reason might be.
Okay.
We always offer parents an opportunity though.
And I'm sure you'll get there, but at what point do they not just get an offer, but they get told they have to, they're sorry, you're coming to the principal's office too?
Yep.
Is that on step 2 or is that further down the line?
Well, anytime we're talking exclusionary discipline, if the kids are going home,
Right, sure.
someone's coming to get them. Usually if it's an in-school suspension, parents are offered the opportunity because of course, parents can decline an in-school suspension and simply say, no, I'm gonna come pick them up and they're gonna do it at home and I'm gonna take them to work with me, I'm gonna put them to work around the house or do something of that nature. In school or out of school suspension, actually, from a legal standpoint, there's no difference. Either way, we are excluding them from the learning that's happening in classes. So we have had parents who, once they find out their kids are going to be in school suspension for a day, 2 days, 3 days, they'll say, nah, they're gonna do it at home and we're gonna take care of things here. So then if by the second time, we certainly hope that this has fixed the issue. Rarely though, it continues past that and quite frankly, then it just follows our discipline guidelines. We follow progressive discipline, meaning another longer exclusion up to and including potentially short-term suspension up to 10 days, long-term suspension up to the remainder of the semester. And in my last point on the administration process, law enforcement can be utilized to reinforce negativity of the actions that are occurring, but rarely do they result in criminal charges because as difficult as this is from a school standpoint sometimes, because people with badges carry more weight than we do, quite frankly, there aren't specific laws against bullying as a school behavior that would constitute and then lead to criminal charges. So many times, and Mr. Skipper and I have had this conversation about sometimes the school doesn't even find out before things get posted about bullying and harassment. Oftentimes the first call is to police. And most of the time, the result of that is an explanation about a no contact order from the police, from the sheriff, and what the legal requirements of getting a no contact order can be. And then, of course, we're left with the fun conversation that, for the most part, no contact orders have no power inside a school. Very rarely will a judge sign a no contact order that includes any impact during the school day. Because during the school day, students are expected and the expectation is that they are being supervised. So therefore, there should be no need for it. I can say in my 24 years of administration that I've seen probably less than 5 no contact orders, short of a report of a sexual assault that went to the level where it impacted school. It's very rare. Next slide, please. For staff, increasingly, we are intervening in staff-related HIV complaints. And I think it's important to notice that this is not a localized issue. Schools all over the region are reporting the same. And from our standpoint, we have to ensure that our systems are in place to ensure a productive work environment. When I have spoken with other superintendents in the region, many of them have said we simply use our student policies for staff. Well, the problem with that is that our board policies are not meant to be going back and forth. Our student policies in the 3000 series are for students. They cannot be legally applied to adults, even though the situation may be very similar. So with that, next slide, please. Our board policy that we have in place, we have two currently in place, policy 5250, which are the general rules of staff responsibility and conduct. The first 4 of the 12 are what I've included here that are they go along with our topic of conversation this evening. Acts of discourteous nature or disrespectful manner towards parents, school patrons, students, or employees. They use language that's offensive or profane. Use threats or personal/political influence to secure promotion, leave, transfer, or change of evaluation. That one is the least of the 4. And then 4, intimidate, threaten, coerce, or abuse either physically or mentally another employee, patron, or student. Those are our general rules that we have on the books. And these are the same rules that people go through when they go through our yearly Safe Schools. We then have a separate policy, which is 5011, that covers all of the sexual harassment involving staff and all the potential outcomes there. The one that I would make the recommendation, and depending on where the board wants to go, I would like to see us add policy 5161, which is titled Civility in the Work Environment. And this is more specific to the actual work environment, promoting civility with some outcomes that are tied to the policy should the board decide to put it in place. I think it would be a good step to show that the board is putting this at the forefront. We have not had this policy in place, and it was recently updated by WASDA. So that'll be something, given the board's approval and some conversation, I'd like to bring forward at our next meeting for a first reading. Next, and I hinted at this, limits of authority. Our administrators, like we talked about, are being asked to be the solutions for things that often fall outside of their own jurisdiction or that lack impact in the school setting. I can tell you in the last few years, things have made it to my level as superintendent. And when I speak to administrators at the building level about the perception of bullying or harassment and intimidation, sometimes, in fact, I would say more than sometimes, the catch that the principal gives me is, but Mr. Peterson, these aren't having any impacts on instruction. It's not impacting learning. These students are not seeing each other during the day. They're seeing each other on social media or outside of school. And while that doesn't stop us from having conversations, that really does stop us from especially exclusionary discipline. Because unless it's interfering with one of those two things, we are not in a position where we can suspend students for things that don't occur within our nexus of control. And it's not an easy conversation, but it is a conversation that happens periodically.
So if there's activity taking place outside of the classroom, such on social media as you suggest, but it has carryover impacts to where someone's feeling anxious or otherwise upset in the classroom, is that a gray area? Or
honestly, it's not a gray area with regards to formal discipline, in that we can't impose formal discipline for those behaviors. However, our administrators still have the ability to have the conversations with the students involved and with the parents involved, and let them know that while it has not up to this point risen to a level where we can do any discipline, that it is something we're going to have to watch, and the parents need to be aware of if these things continue or were to happen at school, what the consequences would be. So the conversations can happen for things that occur outside of school, and I would say 90% of the time the parents are completely unaware that these things are happening. However, for us to impose discipline, it has to be something that interferes with learning or instruction.
So
I understand it's supposed to interfere with learning and instruction, but say that bullying, whether it be cyberbullying, whatever, takes place during school hours. Say Billy's taunting Bobby via Facebook during math class.
That's entirely that is ours now. There is no issue as far, if social media, and we have had cases where we have disciplined kids. Unfortunately, the advent of one-to-one devices has led us to conversations with kids around bullying and harassment that happen on teams during school. But there is no difference with that happening online during school versus happening in person during school. The consequences and the conversations are exactly the same. It really is a difficult position to put an administrator in, where a parent will bring in a printout of Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, something, and the time is 9 o'clock at night when it happened. Yes, it was between two of our students. However, for us to do anything other than a conversation is difficult at best, illegal at worst case. The conversations, like I said, though, will happen and do happen. It's simply the discipline that's associated with them that we can't impose until something happens here. Again, if you take nothing else from this, and go ahead to our last slide, the real thing to focus on are the power imbalances and the impact it has at school. If we have the during school interference of virtually anything, we can and will intervene on behalf of the bullied party or the harassed party or the intimidated party. It's when those things don't happen, things get really, really muddy. So these though, and again, my intent was to show you the legal side of things, what the principals are dealing with, and then put that into perspective as Josh has had conversations leading to our next agenda item. And the impetus for that was, quite frankly, the fact that we have seen on social media claims of harassment and bullying that we are unaware of and have not been brought to our administrators' attention, because once they are, those conversations have happened. So entertain any questions if they have them, or if you have them. And
well, yeah, I appreciate that presentation. I think it's important conversation to have, because I think the entire board takes bullying very seriously.
Mhm.
So, the paramount duty of our school district is to ensure the safety of our students. And then even beyond that, I think it should go without saying that we have a very serious expectation that all of our staff feel that they have a safe, productive, professional work environment. So any sort of unprofessional behavior amongst our staff is not to be tolerated as well. So some of the instances that we've heard about are disappointing, to put it lightly. So I think it's an important conversation to have. So I appreciate starting that.
absolutely. Which will take us to item F.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a nice segue into item
Yeah.
F, but I didn't know if anyone else had any comments or questions on the presentation there.
The only thing I got as far as tracking the bullying,
Mhm.
I know you said you wait till discipline. Is there a way to, if there is a situation, is that student have something to file that tracks it and goes with them? So if it happens a month later, we know, hey, this happened a month ago. Now this is, I don't know if there's something in place.
Correct, and I apologize for that. I should have said we use PowerSchool, which is our student information system, and it has what are called log entries, and every time, and our principals are getting quite good at it, just in our second year, of anytime there's a conversation that occurs, they're supposed to log that happened, so that way, and one of the ways that I explain it to the principals so that they understand is, when a parent calls me about an issue at a school, regardless of the level, the very first thing I do is find the student and I look at their log entries and discipline history to determine whether, has this even been addressed? Has it gone through the proper channels? And that will stay with them for their career. So yes, we have our system is very good, and of course it's limited by being as good as the information that goes in. But that's a regular discussion with principals, is making sure that those logs are entered in a timely fashion so that there is no lag time, that they can't get to me or get to another administrator in the time before the log gets put in.
Any other comments on item E? Okay, well, moving on to item F, the board Q&A. I'm trying to remember the last time we had one, but it's been a while.
It's about a year ago at this time.
Well, yeah, and obviously when we have public meetings, we have to have items on the agenda in order to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. So last year we had essentially a meet and greet. I don't know what the proper terminology for it would be. I guess board Q&A works just as any other title, but we can have up to 2 members of the board here. So unfortunately it can't be all of us. So we'll have to draw straws or see who doesn't want to go. But some of the topics we wanted to talk about with the community. Number one, being bullying, hear about experiences that people are having, what we can do. And I think the presentation that Mr. Peterson just went through is an important one to explain what we can and can't do. So there's maybe some expectations that we're not doing anything, or even we don't care, that one being obviously far from it. But we do want to have that be an open topic, let people come in, bring up any concerns they may have. It doesn't just have to be limited to topics we bring up either. That is why it's a Q&A, but we did want to have bullying as kind of the forefront to that. And second, really want to talk about cell phone use in schools. I think it very, very much a related topic. When we hear about social media and posts happening at 9 o'clock at night, I'll be the first to say that if we need to be very blunt with parents, you need to put your devices away at night, or maybe throw them into the river, one of the two. So I would like to continue conversations about that topic as well, and we'll get into it and see where that may lead us. But we welcome any other topics as well, or questions that anyone may have for the board, or even Mr. Peterson. And I'm not sure if we're planning to drag Drew here or not, or Mona, but other than that, I think we're targeting May 7th. Is that right?
May 7th looked like a great date, as we already have a community council meeting on the books.
That's right.
My question, of course, now that I've gotten to the meeting, how does May 9th look, Thursday, May 9th? The reason I say that is I'm actually at a superintendent's conference. It will end early that day, and I want to ensure that I'm able to be back in time. I don't think it'll be a problem. However, I did want to eliminate any potential if the 9th works.
I'll have to get back to you. I'm working that day, but day shift, so I'll have to get back to you.
Okay.
If I get somebody to cover it.
Well, this will be 6 o'clock.
Oh, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock in this room.
We can-
We'll probably make it work. I'll say the 7th was better for me, but if we need to do the
I
9th.
can do either.
And again, we can only have 2 of us,
Right.
so. But I mean, since I kind of suggested the 2 topics, I feel like I should at least be here for it, but.
I would just hate to get stuck in something on the road and not be able to make it back in time. I'd rather just eliminate that as possible.
So you have a meeting on the 7th.
I have a meeting in Chelan on the 7th.
Gotcha.
I'd love to just say, I know I'll be back by then, but the last time I did that, I was not.
Yeah, we can plan the 9th.
And then I'll send you all, or have Heidi send you all an invite, and you guys can decide amongst yourselves which two want to do it. The other option, depending on the level of conversation, we can always have someone present for a discussion around harassment, intimidation, bullying, and then we can swap it out and have somebody do the second half that's different. If they've got a topic they really would prefer to be a part of, we can switch them out for a cell phone discussion or anything else that comes up.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a plan.
We just do tag, you're it, and slap hands at the door.
Okay, and then I imagine we'll promote that on the website, social media, and any other communication
Correct.
avenues that we have.
Heidi, is there any way if a parent had a topic they wanted to speak of, that they could get that information to you ahead of time? So that if we needed to do any research on our policies or anything like that, we had it.
I think one of the things, and ironically, Heidi brought it up in conversation with me prior to Josh even mentioning the discussion, was that, you know, we had a very positive response the last time we did a Q&A. And I would like to see us, even on if it was a rotation basis, do one once per quarter. Regardless of whether or not we have topics to discuss or not. Obviously, it'd help if we did. Just to then say, if someone does bring us something that wasn't planned, we can always get back to them and make it a topic for the next meeting. If we have one in May, thinking May, September, January. Yes, every quarter, every 3 months, then we should be good. And I think the response certainly will be better than it is for my community council meetings. But I'd really like to give that a shot to try and engage our community more.
Okay. Anything else on that item? Okay, moving on to board comments. Well, I at least want to acknowledge that, you know, we heard this afternoon of an incident at Wiley Elementary in West Richland, and, you know, obviously violent incidents are tragic enough, but especially when they happen at schools, it's especially scary, and, you know, it's obviously hits close to home to everyone in the Kybe community. So just want to, you know, I don't know a lot of the details at this time, or if anyone does, but just want to note that the Kybe community shares in the grief of the families and friends that are involved in that incident. And that, you know, Pete, I hope you just keep us apprised of anything that we can do to support Wiley Elementary. So.
Absolutely.
Only I want to say is I attended the Migrant Spring Fling they had. There's quite a few people that showed up. Pretty good event, had a lot of information out there for the kids. Good food too, so.
Even better.
Anything else? Okay. Superintendent's report, Pete?
Oh, thank you. And very, just briefly, I met with the City of Benton City and the Safe Routes to Schools group. So right now, we're in the process in partnership with the city of applying for a grant. And what that grant would support are finishing, quite frankly, the sidewalks on both sides of 225, where they end just past the middle school and the Mexican restaurant, and then go all the way up to where they would reattach to the sidewalks at the end of the high school on both sides of the street. Those would also include some of the fancy crosswalk flashers, the ones that you can hit and the lights will go on, and anyone at any time of day can use those. But given the amount of traffic on 225, I think it's warranted. And the best part is, assuming we can get this grant, it will come from the state from a funding standpoint. As you know, if you've heard me talk about when we're trying to make plans around new schools, and anytime you're talking SR 225, you're talking Washington Department of Transportation. So it's a whole nother level of clearance that they've got to go through. But the grant writers, the city, and the school district are all on the same page. And I'm going to be writing a letter of support. And I'm going to be looking for a couple of parents who I've met with in the past over the years around safe routes to school and see if we can get them to sign off as well. Next, just an FYI, of course, we're currently in the middle of our financial audit for the district.
Okay.
Things are going well. We had our entrance meeting. Drew and Mona have been busily, I'm glad we don't have to say copying and giving copies to people anymore. We've entered the 21st century and we're sending things via email. So it's very cool, have a very secure web browser that you have to utilize so that no one can get access to some of those documents, but it's going well. As well as we're making plans already, working on our budget for next year, getting ready. I'm assuming at some point we'll have a public works session around budgeting for next year. With that in mind, and I've told Drew several times today, he can kick me under the table if I say anything out of line. However, our budget's looking very good. We're in a much better place than we were at this time last year. Moving forward, we are all set with summer school. Summer school is fully funded, despite what some of the rumors are at the elementary school. And while we're not flush by any stretch, we're in a good place to be able to replace all of our staff who are retiring or moving on. We've hired not only Mr. Davison, but we've hired a middle school and an elementary school counselor. We are not having to worry about cuts through either attrition or rifts or anything at this point. We're in solid financial shape, and I attribute that to the solid work that both Drew and Mona have done. A pain at the time, difficult at the time, of course, but gets us into a position where we're not looking for things to necessarily whack. And then finally, I would like to make a suggestion to the board and quite frankly, it would be on behalf of the board as well. Our principals have come to me and asked me if the board would be interested in sponsoring a grade level student of the year at each grade level, chosen by staff at each grade level, with the understanding that we want to promote what's best and good about all of our kids, but also understanding that sometimes the kids who've had the not the easiest road in life or school sometimes don't get recognized. And this is really a recognition on behalf of the board. The principals would like to give to some of our kids who show high levels of perseverance and grit and overcoming of obstacles. I think it's especially appropriate to hear some stories of kids who are making it through high school. But as you all know in discussions, we've seen elementary school kids who quite frankly are excelling that haven't had the easiest road to hoe either. And so it would be a way for you to invite a group of 13 kids from TK through 12th grade to a board meeting, actually 14 kids, and simply have them at a board meeting and get to acknowledge that these are some kids in Benton City who have made a difference over the past year for their own education and maybe even for some others. So this is not a requirement right now, but we got the idea from an SCAC principals meeting. And Mr. Henry was so impressed with some of the things he heard from kids and from board members that he asked me to bring it forward. And he's gotten approval that if the board decides to go down that road, they can find kids and make sure that they get them to a board meeting, which would be the last board meeting in May. Because of course, the one after that, we're going to be out of school by. So this would be on the 28th of May when we'd recognize a student for quite a few things.
Yeah, well, I can't see a downside to doing that unless the students perceive that as punishment come here for yeah, no, certainly would love to recognize those students. Those are all important qualities that you just mentioned in traits.
Agreed.
All right, any comments or questions for Mr. Peterson? All right, with that, we will move into executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, performance of a public employee to last 30 minutes with no business to follow. And with that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you all.